When you multiply or divide numbers with the same sign, so for example a negative and a negative and a positive and a positive, the product or quotient, so product means multiply and quotient means divide, of the two numbers is always positive. So that's like a positive and multiplied by a positive, or a positive divided by a positive, or a negative times a negative, or a negative divided by a negative. But when the two signs are different, it's going to be negative. So if you have a negative times a negative times a negative, what's going to happen is you're going to take the negative times a negative. So a negative times a negative is a positive number, and then you're going to multiply it by a negative number. So these two signs are different, so the answer is going to be a negative number. So when the two signs are the same, it's a positive, but if they're different, it's a negative. But sometimes you can have a situation where there's more than two numbers. So you could have three numbers, or what if you had a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative. So what I do is I pair them up. So these two make a positive, these two make a positive. A positive times a positive is a positive. So for example, 4 times 2, they're both positive, so it's 8. Negative 5 times 2 is a negative 10. It has to be negative because one is a negative and one is a positive. The signs are different. These two are negative, so that's going to be a positive 18. This is 12 divided by negative 4, so that's going to be a negative 3. So here's more. A negative times a positive is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And I want you to look at E and F very carefully here. So this too is called an exponent. So what you're going to do is, it means this exponent tells you the number of times that you're going to multiply this number. So I'm going to write it out like this: negative 3 times negative 3. So I am squaring negative 3. So negative 3 times a negative 3 is a positive 9. And you would think that this number is going to be the same. But this is where I talked about before how it's really important that you plug in negatives in parentheses. So what you're going to do with this one is you're going to do order of operations. You do exponents first. So this is doing, hey, let's take the opposite of 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, so this is actually going to be negative 9. So this is doing 3 squared, the opposite of that. This is doing negative 3 squared, which is negative 3 times negative 3. Okay, now I'm just going to review some fractions. So when you're multiplying fractions, it's easier than adding and subtracting because you just have to multiply the denominators and the numerators. So you multiply straight across, and don't forget to reduce. So 1 times 3 is 3. This is 3/10. It does not reduce. Letter B, 1 is a positive, 1 is a negative. So you know it has to be a negative. 2 times 4 is 8. And 9 times 7 is 63. And then letter C, if you have a whole number, you just need to put a 1 underneath it and multiply straight across. So 3 times 6 is 18 over 4. Now you're going to need to reduce that, so I'm going to divide them both by 2 and get 9 over 2. when dividing fractions, we need to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So reciprocal means if you have a over b, the reciprocal of a over b is b over a. So what you do is you change the division problem into a multiplying problem. And same things apply where you multiply straight across. So this is 3/14. So letter B, it's negative 4/9 times, flip this over, 8/5. So you're going to multiply straight across and get negative 32 over 45, and it doesn't reduce. So some people ask, just a quick thing, it's not super important, but notation wise, if you have negative 4 over 9, that is the same thing as 4 over negative 9, and it's also the same thing as having the negative number right where the fraction bar is. So all three of these are equivalent. So sometimes you'll see it like this, sometimes you'll see it like this, sometimes you'll see it like this. It's still a negative and a positive, so the whole thing is going to be negative. So over here for my answer, it didn't really matter if I left my answer with the negative on the top, the numerator, denominator, or in the middle. Letter C. I'm going to write this this whole number as 4 over 1 times 6 over 5 because I'm dividing fractions. So this is 24 over 5, and it does not reduce. And then down here is just a mix, so just be careful with your signs. So if I have positive times a negative, it's going to be a negative, and I'm going to multiply straight across. And I need to make sure I'm always checking to reduce my fraction. And then these two are positive numbers, so I'm going to multiply straight across. And then I look to reduce it, and I can't. So really, I'm going to do a separate teaching on reducing first. You always want to try to cancel out common factors, but we actually haven't had that happen yet. I'll explain that in class more. So this is going to be 1/3 times 10/3 because I flipped this, so it's going to be 10/9. And it's positive because this is a positive divided by a positive. The letter D is going to be a negative because it's a negative divided by a positive, so it's negative 2/3 times 9/8. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about with common factors. You are really going to want to step up in, maybe in middle school you just always multiplied straight across and then reduced it. I really want you to reduce within the problem. So what I mean by that is you're going to look at, okay, I can't reduce 2/3, but really, this is 2/8 right here. So 2/8 you can also reduce diagonally as long as the problem is a multiplication problem. This is going to be important when we do variables. So if you have 2/8, what does 2/8 turn into? Well, 2/8 turns into a 1/4. And also diagonally you have 9/3. So what does 9/3 turn into? Well, that turns into 3/1. So in the end you have negative 1 times 3, so you have negative 3 over 1 times 4, which is 4. So you might say, well, I can get the same answer if I do it my way. You're just going to want to try this, use this technique because it's going to come in handy later. Multiple times. You'll be able to do problems much faster. And when there's variables. Okay, then let's quick check. So to evaluate, remember evaluate means plug in. And whenever we have a negative number, we always want to put it in parentheses. So it's going to be y squared, which is 3 squared minus 3 times, this is a negative number, negative 5. I'm going to use order of operations. So 3 squared is 9. 9 minus negative 3 times negative 5, or you could think of this as either 3 times negative 5, so this is negative 15, is 9 plus 15, which is 24. And then letter B, it's a fraction, so it's going to be 4 times negative 5 on the top over 7 times y, which is 3. So nothing can cancel out diagonally or vertically right here, so I'm just going to end up multiplying negative 20 over 21.